Okay, hello. Just taking a breath, pulling up my notes. I'm in a room with a dog and two birds, so if you hear noises, that's what that is. Take some breaths, get some water, land in your space, perhaps grab your notebook. The following teachings are translations from Hadar Cohen, who is an Arab Jewish spiritual teacher. And she downloaded, transmission these to a group of us last week, and I brought my notes together to share with you. So these are notes inspired by Hadar's teachings. But since they're coming through me and not Hadar, I just want to name that they may morph and shift and pivot and be a little different than Hadar's version. The first thing that I want to start with during this time is that this is a time of the unknown. Is that while we feel as if we know everything that's going on, we don't. And we think we know what the truth is, and we don't. And truth is a word that shifts and that has different meanings and perspectives. And there's truth in kind of like real time, and then there's truth in time space continuum, and there's capital T truth, and there's lowercase t truth, and there's multiple truths. So we have this reality is that we don't know the truth, and that there are lots of truths. See, this thing about spirituality is you're going to hear a lot of paradox and it's going to really require your brain to like shift gears and pause and think about things. It's not going to be linear. It'll be more in a spiral. So what are the divine laws? Divine laws are universal laws that are not patterns and predictions in the earthly human realm. So the larger question in the unknown, in the unseen world is like, what's the relationship between the sort of human earthly laws right now and divine laws? These are some things you can think about for yourself, meditate on, take a walk on, just journal about. How do we make sense of the unknown? How do we make sense of unknown times? How do we make sense of the mystery? Because the reality is so much deeper, wider. It's so much bigger. It's like the landscape of reality is just so much more vast than our teeny tiny human experiences that are mostly here in the mind, and everything, all the narratives and all the perspectives and all the stories that we've held are here. And this is a really different invitation. The spiritual path is one of vastness, is a wide, deep, vast reality. And so what is the narrative of your inner world? And how do your beliefs strengthen your narrative? And how do your relationship strengthen your narrative? And how does what you read and what you see, and then your nervous system, like just pay attention to how all of these things are related. So something to remember is that safety and interconnection are related. And remember, when we don't feel safe, we will often isolate. When we do feel safe, we will often be able to feel into that interconnectedness. And we feel safe when we feel connected. And that could be nature, animals, trees, earth, right? All the elements, all the natural world, all the animals, and the humans. When we feel connected, we feel safe in our families of origin and our friend circles. Just reminding us of this. When there is a rupture of safety, and a rupture of safety could be physical, emotional, or relational, we end up feeling isolated and we hurt. The collective is bound together. And so let's think about this. Just do a visual in your mind. Safe connected belonging, not safe, isolated, activated, othering, not feeling as if we belong or that we're bound up together. We're able to separate and isolate, which is not how we really are. And there's currently a rupture in safety for so many humans, right? Like, and also the earth, if we bring in kind of what's happening climate-wise. But let's just talk about the humans and the current war situation. So there's a rupture. We've had a shift in our narrative, which means that we may have felt safe and been open to things. And then we had this huge rupture, and now we don't feel safe, and our narrative is getting smaller and more fear-based. And we don't have a lot of capacity to grow or expand that connection. And then also what happens is that like our lens and view and perspective becomes just more narrow in that space rather than safe and trusting and open and expansive. And we are limited in our capacities and perceptions and fixated. We get stuck in the cycle. We get a narrow narrative. We build on the narrative. We think we know truth or our reality, and it becomes our perception and the narrative. It's tight, and we get stuck in these cycles. And you can be stuck in these cycles for multiple decades of your life, where it's even getting more narrow, especially if you don't learn these spiritual principles in terms of expansion and safety and trust and love and the path to the heart and what regulation means. It can be really actually easy to get stuck in that cycle. And then also, actually, I think about this visually. Oh, I just had a hit, is like, then think about all the people that you kind of are like in work with or walk down the street, and they're all in theirs and everybody is stuck in their cycle. And then you meet someone who's like on the same wave as you. And then you guys get stuck in that cycle together, and you feed the narrowness, you feed the narrative. I know so many people where that's the case, where like they only spend time with people in that same conditioned box, in that same headspace, and they don't have the capacity to have safety and trust and expansiveness. So one thing that Hadar teaches is that God is known as is the all-seer, and that, and again, when I'm using the word God, I'm thinking spirit, source, nature, goddess, Shekhinah, whatever the word is that you want to use, but that there's an all-seeing, a seer of all, and that we're not that. And so we're not seeing the things that are hidden. We're not the knower of all reality. But that we do still, as humans, have a need for this safety and trust, and that our internal world and external world are mirroring each other in the interconnection. Now, think about the mirrors in terms of the walls of the heart, the armor, the blockades, the violence, the aggression. It can be internal and obviously external. We see this very physically. We've seen it in a lot of the visuals in how Israel, Palestine, especially Gaza and the West Bank, and the walls and the outdoor prisons, like you could see these physical representations, but also, and again, there are other places in the world where these are happening, but the purpose of this particular teaching is just to also notice where are the walls in my own heart, because we're mirrors of the internal and external world. And the narrow narrative actually hardens us and makes us more resistant to opening. And so what if we resist nothing? What if we allow, through silence and breathing and expansion and regulation, some other things we'll talk about, path to the heart, allow things to be metabolized and integrated, so that we can see what's here and we can continue to check in with this larger vision of reality, instead of suppressing the rupture or not metabolizing or tightening. And the phrase that you can use is let's see what is here. And that's a really different approach than I know this or this is happening. It's more, let's see what's here. So let's talk about regulation and dysregulation for a second. So regulation, how can we bring safety and regulation into the field? The way that Hadar teaches this in like a spiritual lens is that nature is at the center of the world for all of humanity. The spiritual practitioner translate this into pain and suffering. Okay, so basically, our connection to nature, our connection to God, life force, is a regulated state. That when we feel connected to the more expansive view of reality, when we feel love flowing through us, when we feel connected to God, interconnected with each other, when we feel belong, when we feel like we're plugged in, we are regulated, or we're in a more regulated state. When we are in dysregulation, and we're responding from a patterned response, a nervous system pattern. You could call it a trauma, you could call it an activation. There's lots of different versions of this on the spectrum, but let's just talk about it as this a reactivity or an autopilot or a trauma response that is dysregulated into from a really narrow place. We are not in the flow of life energy. We are not in relationship to God, source, spirit, nature. We are in that much tighter realm of fear. We don't feel safe. So we're not able to connect. That's what the dysregulation, the congestion, the blocking. Dysregulation means we're not in the flow of life energy. We're not feeling connected to God. And one thing that Hadar always reminds us is the connection to God and life force and energy is the justice liberation path. This view does not, there is no othering, there is no hierarchy, there is just equality among the human species, or among our interconnectedness and our relationship to God. It's available to all. There's no just this group or just this group, or you can't, or you have to do this and then that happens. The justice liberation path is the connection to life force and energy, and that's available to everybody. And that's a regulated path available to everybody. I'm just going to take a pause, and I'm feeling so regulated and connected to source right now. I just want to offer gratitude. So dysregulation means we're not in the flow of life energy, and we're not in alignment with the life force. We're blocking the flow, or there's a disruption, a rupture in the flow of life force. There's a disruption of the flow of life force moving through us. And regulation is the flow with God, life force. Dysregulation is the block. Dysregulation is when we don't know the reality. We cling to the narrative. We attach, we avoid, we have illusions, delusions, and they create suffering. And these also protect dysregulated fear states and trauma states. So let's pull that apart a little. We actually get attached to our illusions or delusions, and that creates suffering, and it tries to protect us. I hope that's clear. Like, I can feel it in my body how that is, but I'm curious, like, if you were here live, what questions you would have about that. So please bring them up, email them to me or whatever after. So the spiritual path or practice is to return to the path of the heart, back to life force, regulation, connection. And so the main question for this time is, how do I find the path to my heart space? Now, this path to our heart space is the path to our regulated space. And from there, we choose justice, liberation, interconnectivity, humanity, and love. We activate the regulation through the heart space, through the feeling space, because love is actually an infinite well. It's boundless. There's no limit. And in this state, we're actually connected to our most mystical version of ourselves, which is completely dedicated to the love of humanity and compassion. The practice of the mystic is dedicated to the love of humanity. And so from the path of the heart, from the loving, open, regulated space, we're actually able to attune to justice and liberation in really healing and whole ways. But it all goes back to this: how do I find my path to the heart space? And then what's my path to the heart? And activating the heart and the healing feeling field. I'm going to pause with that. There's a healing feeling field that comes from the path of the heart. And this regulation, this stability is so deeply like comforting and compassionate. Doesn't mean there's not grief. It doesn't mean there's not sadness or emotion, energy in motion, emotion. But we're not blocking, right? We're not suppressing, blocking, and then narrowing and attacking. It's a really different field to be in. Even in difficult times, the question is like, how do I return to the path of the heart? Because that is my truest teacher and guide, because that's me connected to God. That's me connected to source. The temple of the heart is always open. It's open to all. The life force, the love force. She said this one sentence that was really so beautiful. We are not well if we are disconnected from the path of the heart. We are not well if we're disconnected from the heart. And I think, I know I felt that there are so many very, very, very dysregulated, hurt, not well people in charge of a lot of this, unfortunately. And I can feel that. And especially just saying it so simply. I've heard the saying hurt people for so many years. And this week I heard healed people heal people. And I love that idea, right? I love that idea that if we can be on the healing, heart loving path, that actually can be contagious, that actually can be what we spread. Okay, so next little part, our identities and narratives contribute to us feeling attacked. So then she went into this whole part about identity and about how when we are so attached to our identities, it's so, and how that interconnects with the narratives that give us the limited view. It continues to, again, pull us away from the kind of life force energy, the love force energy, the God energy, because the truth is, we don't really know why we're here. The truth is, this is all a big mystery, this human experiment, this, I don't even know what to call it, but we don't know why we're here. We don't really know what's going on while we're here. We don't know what happens when we die. We don't know. I mean, there's so much we don't know, but we identify so much with our identities to make this human path easier and to try to make sense of this time. And we'll say we are this and we are that, and then we become more attached to our beliefs, identity, safety, right? We think the identity and the belief is what's making us safe. I thought I was this, but I'm really this. And so what is my identity, and is it a safe identity? If I get fixated on a narrative, it can disconnect me from the heart path, the connection to the life force, right? And so it's like, I'm this, and it's narrowing, and I'm attaching myself to that. And then I'm staying in that kind of cycle and pattern. And then there's a rupture and I don't feel safe. And then I'm even tighter, rather than, again, think about like all the ways in which all of those things I just named disconnect us from God. Go get it, Snoopy. It's not so easy to find the heart path when we don't feel safe. It can be very tricky, and it can be hard to move from the narrative and the identity to the path of the heart. So it's important just to say here, we can remember who we are, which is like God's children or the beloved humans, like whatever words you want to use. Again, if God is loaded for you, don't use that. You could use Mama Nature, or Moon, or Spirit, or Magic, whatever it is. But remembering who we are in the interconnected family that we are, in the connection to source and spirit, to connection to regulation, that's what can help us move from the narrative identity path to the heart path. And then it kind of dissolves some of the narratives because of the various identities. So if we don't have a clear narrative anymore, because all these various identities have started to dissolve, we can actually be at an intersection that can be very painful, because I think a lot of people are experiencing that right now, because there's so much rupture in the collective unconscious. There's so much grief. There's so much just collective noise that I think a lot of us are feeling like a recalibration of our identities and how these identities are hurting us or helping us or harming us. And at the end of the day, if the path to connection to source is the path of the heart, maybe a lot of that doesn't matter as much. I don't know. There's some elements to this that I've really been thinking about and chewing on and just breathing with and just kind of letting marinate a little. Our narrative can collapse, right? The narrative that we've created can collapse, and that can be very painful. And one of the things that is very clear is that there's many of us in this space between, in the middle places, where there are like multiple truths or no truths. And those of us that feel connected to source or spirit, like there's no othering, because we're all part of the same interconnected webs, but these narratives and these identities have really destroyed us and really disconnected us from source. And so that's where, you get these very like large statements about whole groups of people, and they're isolating and painful and just not true. They're just, we can't make up whole group identities. All blank are blank. It's just really not possible. And when we remember the path of the heart, we can see that we're really talking about embodied energetic practices. These other kind of identities or narrow spaces and narratives are ways that divide us rather than bring us together. And so the invitation is to remember the path to the heart and listen to the heart space of other people. Listen for the heart space of other people. Listen for the hurt in other people, so that you can be skillful and compassionate, and that you can be connected to source and spirit and God, while others are dysregulated, that they may have a narrative that's really narrow and hooked in and attached, but you are in a wider space, and that you can be very compassionate in that space. You don't have to be in that cycle. And that this is available to everyone. The way we get there is through experience and practice. It's a skill that you can build. So what are you practicing? Narrative, identity, dysregulation, disconnection, or are you practicing connection, compassion, and returning to the path to the heart? And that's how we get closer to the heart. And really, again, I just want to name, heartbreak is when some of these attachments of the heart start to open, and they start dropping. And there's so much grief in even our connection to each other and to God and to spirit. And so behind all of this, really touching into the emotions allows us actually to feel more deeply the connection to source. What a gift. And let me just see if there's anything else I want to say. I think the last thing is just to be witnessing the patterns in the bodies and the minds. So now that you've had these teachings, thank you, Hadar, again. Are you able to be more skillful in witnessing the patterns? Are you able to be more skillful? Oh, sorry, I'm like having a little allergy. In your path to the heart, and what does that feel like to you? And how can you prioritize like path to the heart prayers and meditations and songs and movements in a time when the world is getting more attached to their narratives and their identities? Can we be the ones who open more towards compassion and deep, deep love? And the last thing I want to say is just, it's available to everyone. It's experience and practice. It's a skill, and we can share it with our loved ones and with each other. So I'm so curious to see how these teachings land for you. They've been really, really, really helpful and supportive to give some language to some things that I've known at a very visceral level. And now I'm grateful to have the language to share with you. Okay, take good care.